Hello and welcome to For Book Lovers Only, where we interview great authors and talk about some amazing books. My name is Rob Brown, your host and chief book lover. Today, our guest is an author and a publisher. She's written 6 books. I don't see where she gets time to sleep. She's so busy, and she probably has 6 more books that she's going to write in the future. So we're really excited about having her on the set. Please welcome Anne Meekins. Anne, thank you so much for being here. Really happy to have you.
Thank you, Rob. It's so great to be here. I'm so glad for this opportunity.
Absolutely. And we're really honored that you were able to come all the way down from, was it New York?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And how was that trip coming down here?
It was interesting. It was good to get away. So I enjoyed the ride, and I just made it feel like a vacation.
Good, good. And are you originally from New York?
Born and raised.
Born and raised.
Yes.
What borough?
In Springfield Gardens.
Springfield Gardens.
Queens. It's Queens.
Oh, Queens.
Yes.
Very nice. Very nice. Do you get down to D.C. other than coming down here for interviews and book signings and things? Do you come down to D.C. often? Or?
Well, you know, I have friends in Virginia and the Maryland area and stuff, so I get a chance to come by and visit.
I see.
Yes.
Now, you've written 6 books, and we're going to talk about all of them today. Okay. But first, you know, each author normally has a unique story as to why they became an author, you know, why they love writing, why they love books. You know, tell us a little bit about your background and why you even decided to start writing books.
Okay, well, I've been writing since I was like 11 years old. I used to write personalized poetry for my friends, and I just like to release through that. You know, it's my creative source, and I just love doing it. And I had a situation that happened to me when I was younger where my poetry was invaded before I was ready to release it. And it shut me down for like 10 years. So it wasn't until I went to college and I asked God to give me back that desire, that passion to write again. And then it started free flowing, and I've been writing ever since. And so I used to write for my first church. I was like the resident poet there, and so every time they had an occasion or whatever, I would write a poem for it, and I grew like a great collection of poetry. And then I decided God gave me the spirit to write a book, you know, and actually 3 at that time to write. And I didn't do it, that was like in 2000. I didn't do the first book until 2008 though.
I see.
Yeah.
So when you're writing your poetry, do you just sit down and say, I'm going to write some poetry, or are you inspired at different times and say, hey, I got to write this down, this is in my heart, this is in my mind? Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's on request. And so if someone wants it or whatever, then I sit down and I ask. I always ask. Whenever I write anything, I always ask for divine guidance, which is where my Inspired for You, everything comes from, you know. I
see.
And so I ask for what the words are. And then God just gives it to me. So if it's a theme, that comes through me. And just, I like to write to help release stress or get clarity. And so if I'm journaling or just sitting down and just need to get through something, I'll just write. It's very therapeutic.
I see. And do you know a lot of other people that use journaling and writing for therapeutic purposes? And is that common?
And in my spiritual communities, most people, because it's healing. And so it's always good, and I always recommend people that if you're going through something or if you need clarity about anything, sit down and write it out. Come out of your head, drop into your heart, and get it down. Because a lot of times we get so overwhelmed because we keep things up in our head and so many things are going down, people losing sleep. And so I say, you know, write it down, get it out, put it down, and then it becomes clearer, and you don't have all that clutter going on up there, and it's more peaceful.
I see. That's a very powerful method to use to kind of cope with, you know, the everyday problems and challenges that life faces, is to actually write it down. So I imagine that it helps actually seeing it on paper and saying, you know, you might have a bunch of different things going through your head. Then when you see it on paper, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I might be able to tackle this.
That's right. When you see it on paper, it's not as daunting as when it's all up in your head. You know, so it really makes a difference. It's a good strategy. And plus you can see where you're going. You can see what's going on inside of you, and then it helps you to get better direction on where to go next or what to do. And then you can tackle it off, check off this, okay, I need to get this done, I need to do that, or this is all the chaos that's going on within me.
Right.
You know, so you can identify what's happening.
Right.
Yes.
So I think for each author, there's a moment when they kind of make the leap and say, okay, I've written all of this great stuff. I want to get it out to the world. I want to publish it. I want to actually write a book. When was your moment of truth when you're like, I'm going to write my first book?
Well, like I said, I had the, I felt I had the divine instruction to do it back in 2000, but what had me get it done was I went to Intervision's Institute for Spiritual Development, Iyanla Van Zandt School, and we were dealing with incomplete actions. And that was one of my incomplete actions.
Was wanting to write a book, but not writing.
Exactly, getting it done. I knew that I was supposed to do it, and I had the material to do it, and I hadn't done it. And so I put that on that was one of my assignments, to complete that incomplete cycle. And so I wrote it down, and then I put down the steps that I was going to take to get it done, and so that's what I did. Because in a lot of my writing, well, most of my writing, especially my poetry, they all have scriptural references. And so that was one of the steps that I said, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write scriptures for each poem, you know what I mean? And then started organizing it like that. And then I got it done.
I see.
Yeah.
And you have a series of how-to books that's for like spiritual and personal development. I think it's 3 in the series, 3 volumes, right?
Yes.
Talk about the first one.
Okay. Well, let me just say first that the series is called Living a Vocal, Valued, and Victorious Life.
Right.
And so that came out of a lot of my personal experiences that I went through, because for so many years I felt voiceless, like I didn't have a voice, and I felt I valued other people more than I valued myself, and I was victimized a lot in life. I experienced rape, different things I went through, and that had me in bondage. And so I wrote the books. They're a series of some of the situations that I've gone through and the tools and techniques that I learned how to heal those situations. So the first book is called How to Uncover, Heal, and Release Painful Life Experiences. And so that dealt with, issues of forgiveness, because I needed to learn how to forgive in order to move forward some of the things that, the assaults on my life that I've had experienced and stuff, and, internal conflict, because I used to hold a lot of stuff in. Right. When I was voiceless, I didn't talk about things. I stuffed them down for years. And they manifest in your body illness and different things. And so, I had to learn how to get rid of that stuff and deal with it. And so that's the first book, And
so for the first book, so you kind of encapsulated the lessons that you learned from dealing with it, and you put it in the first book.
Right, and the tools and the techniques that I used in dealing with forgiveness and issues. For years I didn't have a relationship with my father, and so spiritual journaling, as a matter of fact, was one of the things that helped me to break through. And this was after he died. He passed, and so that story is in the book of how I made peace with that even after death, and the tools that I used to do it, and the conversation that I had with him, and God, in helping me to heal that experience. So,
okay, well, let's dig into that a little deeper. I find that subject particularly fascinating, especially the subject of forgiveness. I think a lot of us struggle with, things that have happened to us in our past, people that may have wronged us, and we have a hard time, forgiving that person, but a lot of times forgiving ourselves for even being in that situation in the first place. What are some of the tools that a person can use? And I know you don't have to go through all of them because it's a lot of information, but just some basic things that a person can use with regards to forgiveness and forgiving others.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that it's so critical for us to forgive for our own selves, to free us up, because I know for me, like the first issue that I had to do with dealing with forgiveness was I was 17, I was in college, and I had gotten raped. And so that was my first experience with intense emotions. Right. And my roommate at the time, she was instrumental in it happening, because it happened in my room. I was in my room, and what happens, I went to a college party. I was mixing drinks, didn't know how to handle it, and so I got drunk, and I got back to the apartment. I mean, they got me back to the dorms, but she let a friend come in, and, well, I thought was a friend, but she let him come in, and while she was over in her bed with her boyfriend, she let him get in, and I was unconscious, really. Right. And she let him get in my bed, and I didn't know until the next morning that something was not right with my body. Right. And and so that issue. But she used to let him come back to the room, And like I said, I was voiceless at that time, so I didn't say nothing, but I was so angry, and I used to feel like my head was going to explode.
Right.
And I just didn't know how to manage that emotion. And so I realized my grandmother used to have the guidepost books, and so I was reading that, and and so it helped me to have a spiritual perspective and recognize that I needed to be, and be in the right relationship with God, I needed to be, I needed to let this go.
Right.
And for myself. And so just so I can breathe and think. And so that helped me with that. Now I still preach because I didn't deal with her or any of that stuff, and I didn't really deal with what was going on until 20 years later. But that was the beginning. I knew that I had to let it go. I couldn't function like that.
Right.
But the tools that I did learn to use, one of them is called Ho'oponopono, and that is a technique that I learned through my prayer line. And it's come from Joe Fidali, his book Zero Limits, and it's a step that tells you what you say is I love you. And you don't have to tell it to the person or whatever, but around whatever the issue is and stuff. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And it deals with the unconditional love, gratitude,
Right.
And extreme forgiveness. And so I repeat that a lot, and I do that even now with issues when somebody offends me or upsets me or whatever. It helps to shift my emotions, from being intense or dealing with it, because I have to be free in order to move forward. They're going on with their life. They're not thinking about
Exactly.
you. They don't care. But for me to be free and stuff, so that's a tool that I use. Another tool that I use is Iyanla Vanzant, from her book, Tapping the Power Within, the forgiveness diet. So I use a variation of that. And what you do is you write down 35 times. Okay, so I'm a little nervous now, so I'm not, but it's a statement of forgiveness, of forgiving whoever, whatever the situation is, and you write down the names, and if more than one person comes up, you just write down all of the names in that one sentence. I forgive such and such, completely, totally and completely. And I can't remember the whole thing right now. And then and you do that before noon in the daytime, and then at night you forgive yourself. So I forgive myself totally and completely. I move on.
I see.
And so so those are the techniques
Those
and so I have those in the book. And I talk about that.
And that's a good foundation for volume 2.
Well, volume 2 is how to press forward and shift to a higher level. And so that is, I lived the first half of my life in fear, a lot of fear about just the unknown, about moving forward. And so it's about pressing through whatever going on and doing it anyway.
Right.
And so even like situations like this, being being a little nervous, being interviewed and stuff, but you have to do what you have to do.
Right.
And and so it's about that. It's about trusting that you're not doing it alone. That God is ever present. He will not let you be put to shame. He will give you the words to say and to do, being open to opportunity. And so, so it's a lot of that. It's a lot of situations that I've encountered in my life and how I move forward through them, the tools and the techniques that I did, so, and what you'll see is the theme through all my books is that divine connection.
Right.
Because without that, I wouldn't even be here today.
And I think that the second book is particularly interesting. You said that you had a lot of fear, and you shift and you press and you move on. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. I remember hearing a sales trainer a couple of years ago say, sometimes you can be scared. You want to do something, be scared. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Do it scared.
That's right.
Do it scared, but do it.
Yes.
Yes. So, and then you had the third book. The third volume in this series, and what does that focus on?
How to know God better and love yourself more. And that is, I love that one. Really, that could have been the first part, because for me, that's where it begins. Right. Everything begins. And, you don't really know how to love yourself until you know God. To have that measure of what real love is, that unconditional love, that acceptance, of who you are as you are, and then growing into something better. And, one of the scriptures that I remind people is that it tells you have to love your neighbor, which is the second greatest commandment, love your neighbor as you love yourself, not more than, not less than. And sometimes we get lost in that. We put other people before us, and we undervalue ourselves. And so you have to, in order to really love somebody else, you have to know how to love yourself. You know,
I see.
you can't really do that. And you can't do any of it until you love, you know, you have that love of God and know that and can really experience that. And so I talk about in that one, I talk about some of knowing God's love, you know, what that's like, you know, how much he really loves you.
Right.
You know, you are loved. You know, a lot of people don't know that, they don't hear it enough. They don't know that they were fearfully and wonderfully made, that God created them and he loves them. And it's just a beautiful thing, you know, that we are beautiful creation.
I see.
With power and authority.
So for this 3-volume series, do you suggest a book lover start with volume 1, or can they skip volume 1 and go straight to volume 2, or what happens if volume 3 kind of hits the mark for them?
You know, all of the volumes are separate in themselves. You know what I mean? It's like wherever you are, they're all good, and you know, and they're cross-referenced too. You know, some things, you know, that may come up, but it's wherever you are. If you really need some healing and you have some painful life experiences and you need some tools and stuff to help you move through that,
right,
that's good. But if you're struggling with self-love or God's love, volume 3, you know, and
right,
if you just, you know, ready to make some moves and do some things and fear has got a grip on you and you want to know how to press through that, then volume 2, you know.
I see.
I say get the whole series.
Absolutely. You got to get the whole series. You can't just get one, you got to get all 3.
Yes.
Got to get all 3. And not just get the series of the volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3, but people should also check out For Such a Time as This,
yeah,
correct?
Yes, for Such a Time as This is one of my inspirational poetry books. And it's my second book and the second poetry book. And that one has like my favorite scripture poems in there. It has Bible narratives, like it has a narrative, a poetic narrative on Miriam, on Moses, you know, so it has some of that in there, their story. And I have like the Psalm 23, I have a poetic narrative of that
beautiful.
in there, and you know, some of my favorite ones and stuff. And then I have some healing poems in there as well, you know, some of my personal healing experiences in there as well. And favorite sermons as well, some, you know, lessons from sermons. I have a poetic versions of those in there.
Oh,
yes.
Amazing. And you have another poetry book as well.
Yes.
And what's the name of that book?
On Solid Ground, Inspirational Poetry for All Occasions. And each poem has like a spiritual reference to it, a quote at the end of it as well. And that one is poems for all occasions. Like if you're at a loss for words, you don't know what to come up with, if you're going to a wedding or, you know, a funeral or whatever, that one has encouragement pieces in it. It has for times of challenge, it has for times of bereavement, it has for relationships, you know, all kinds of things. And then I ended with a ethnocentric expression, and I also have like my own personal experiences in there as well.
I see.
So,
So For Such a Time as This and On Solid Ground, they're standalone, but do they complement each other?
well, it's poetry. If you have a love for poetry, they're both poetry books. They're you know, they have a spiritual reference to it, and you know, it depends on they complement each other, you know.
Right.
But that one is like strictly, like I said, you know, my favorite Bible verses, you know, scriptures,
I see.
you know, Bible characters, that type of thing. On Solid Ground has everything, you know, for
amazing.
all occasions, you know.
I see.
So if you need something, because you know how sometimes they give you like 2 minutes or something at a funeral, or if you know, going to a wedding, or if you want to personalize something, you know, that book is the perfect book for you to come up with something that's nice. And
That's
somebody will
astounding.
like. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. So you are not just an author, but you're a publisher, and you've done self-publishing as well. And you actually wrote a book about self-publishing, how to self-publish in excellence within 10 days.
Yes.
So tell us about this book. Obviously, there's a lot of lessons learned from your own experience.
Well, you know, my first book was published by Author House, and so I wanted to do a second book, and I didn't have the funds to do it, and so I did it with Word and you know, template and stuff. But a lot of people, and the second book was For Such a Time as This. It did not always look like that. It looked like it was 8.5 by 11, and I had used a thing that most people thought was a calendar. So one of my friends told me about CreateSpace. And so I did the second book. So the second version of that second book is For Such a Time as This, what you see now. I did it through CreateSpace. And so then people started asking me to help them to do it, because the person who told me about it was Reverend Valerie Love, and she had a a group that she was teaching, how to get your book published in 90 days. And so she wanted, because I did my book, she wanted me to come on and speak. And so I did, and I shared about that and everything. So after that, I was getting clients who wanted me to help them with their books.
Oh, amazing.
Right? So I was helping in this stuff. But then afterward, I said, you know what? Because I used to be a policy and procedure writer, and I used to do manuscripts and
Right.
teaching them training manuals and stuff. So I said, well, let me show them how to do it, because this way, if they can't hire me to do the work for them, I can show them how to do it themselves. I like to empower people to do it yourself. And
Exactly.
so that's how that book came about, to do that. And and it's pretty good. So in there I have, tips on how to, when you overcome, writer's block, and, doing a spiritual development book. And then I do step by step. It has the pictures and everything in there, from going online to setting up your account, to doing your cover. And it's a free resource that you can use to really help you do the thing for next to nothing. And I mean,
Wow.
when I say next to nothing, you don't put no money out until it's time for you to get your print copy. And that could be as low as $2.15.
Wow, that
So
is
this
really powerful.
Right. You don't have, so there's no excuse. If you have a message to get out there, or a story, or a collection, you can do that and get it out in no time. I did that book using the steps to how to self-publish that, and I did it in six days. So you can get it done and you can have it out, so.
Great. Yeah, I think right now you're inspiring all our book lovers who are watching to maybe, take their own shot at writing and self-publishing their book. Do you have any other books right now that you're working on, any manuscripts in production?
Yes, I do. I have a relationship book that I'm working on, and one of the books from the third series that God gave me a long time ago that I haven't done yet. That's a children's poetic Bible verse for
okay.
that. So that's something that's in the works for me to do as well. Yes, and I would like to say that my birthday's coming up on November 2nd, and so I just had a sale, 99-cent the ebook versions of my books. So that the sale is ending, I think. Today ends the one for the self-publishing. But on November 2nd, I'm putting them all back on sale for the ebook versions for 99 cents. So if anybody
great.
wants to get it, they can do that.
That's
Yes.
interesting. You're the third person that I know that has a November 2nd birthday. I have an uncle and a cousin who has a November 2nd. That's becoming more and more a special day.
All right.
So if book lovers want to learn more about you, pick up a copy of your book, learn about the manuscripts that you have in production, just kind of keep up with you. Do you have a website that they could go to?
I do. It's inspiredforyouministries.com, and that's inspired, INSPIRED, the number 4, the letter U, ministries, MINISTRIES.com.
Great.
Yes.
Joanne, thank you so much for stopping by and spending some time with us. We're really excited about your books and the other things and books that you have in production, and we're just looking for more great things from you, and we hope that in the future you'll stop by and see us again.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for stopping by for Book Lovers Only. If you want to learn more about Joanne and possibly pick up a copy of her book, please visit us at www.forbookloversonly.com. And while you're there, you can get on our mailing list. Also, be sure to join the Village at www.villageconnector.com. My name is Rob Brown. I've been your host and chief book lover, and this is For Book Lovers Only. Be sure to see us again, and remember, if you love books, we have a home for you. Take care.